Hello everyone, welcome to Lockdown Seas World. Today we talk about the Yalta Conference and what China lost. On February 1st to 11th, 1945, the leaders of America, the British, and the Soviet convened in Yalta for defeating Germany and arranging the new world order. The four issues were discussed: the Germany partition and border of Poland and Far East, and the United Nations. And because this conference, the new order after the Second World War, was also called the Yalta system. The Yalta lies in the south of the Crimean Peninsula. It had been occupied by Germany and damaged severely. And in autumn 1944, and when Yalta was chosen as for the conference, the Stalin ordered Beria to accomplish the re-establishment. In the following months, the Beria delivered large building materials and facilities, and mobilized the local troops and the prisoners of war that worked day and night for 3 shifts. More than 200 aircrafts and 300 anti-aircraft guns were deployed for the safety of the meeting. Then many checkpoints were set up. The 74,000 local residents were screened for security clearance, and about 825 suspects were arrested. There were three different places for delegates. That's for Livadia Palace for America, Voronezov Palace for the British, and Yusupov Palace for the Soviet. When refurbished, these buildings had been reinforced also with the shelter. Yet with the delegates with several hundreds of people, the room of accommodation was actually inadequate for Americans, except for the President Roosevelt and his personal advisor Hopkins, had the privilege of a single bedroom. Not all the rest almost had to share. Even the 14 U.S. Army colonels share one bedroom. Initially, the meeting the place had been considered some other city in Mediterranean Sea rather than the Yalta by the Black Sea. For the convenience of U.S. President Roosevelt's poor health, yet Stalin insisted that he couldn't leave the Soviet, especially at the key moment, that when the Soviet army only 40 miles to Berlin. If Yalta was chosen, Stalin could stay and get the upper hand as the host. During the meeting, Stalin preferred to have Roosevelt to arrange the agenda and all the important issues that were discussed as American residents, the Livadia Palace. Whenever pictures were taken, Roosevelt was always at the center. To the same, Roosevelt also respects Stalin as an ally and an opponent. When they had meeting together, Stalin always looked very serious, and Roosevelt tried to make him relaxed and refreshed, even by making jokes of Churchill. Roosevelt's health was in very poor condition, which made Stalin very astonished in the meeting. And 2 months later, after this conference, on April 12th, 1945, before the eve of the victory of Second World War, Roosevelt passed away. When Hitler heard of this news, he was mad with joy. For a little while ago, that an astrologer told him that a great figure will die and the German failure might be changed. Hitler hoped in the disputes and the dissolution of the Allied forces due to Roosevelt's death, and Germany might revive. Yet he failed, because with the Soviets besieged and took over Berlin, and Hitler committed suicide, and Germany surrendered. In Yalta, three leaders discussed the Germany and Berlin partition, and occupied separately by Soviet, the America, the British, and France, to prevent another war waged. About Poland, the Soviet regarded as a corridor that the West invaded Russia. So the Soviet had to move the border to the west and for more buffer zone with a traditional Kozen line. And Poland also moved to the west with compensation of the territory from Germany. The Soviet agreed to join the United Nations with Ukraine and Belarus as the founding members of UN, and the Soviet obtained veto rights as one of the big powers. As to the Far East and Japan, though America had achieved great victories over Japan in the Pacific, yet there were still millions of Japanese troops on Japan's homeland and in China, at least 700,000 troops in Manchuria. Since June 1944, and the Allied forces landed at Normandy and began pushback. Yet in China, along the 2,500 kilometers battle line, millions of the Chinese nationalist army suffered a fiasco and withdrew due to Japanese attack. So with great loss of large areas of China, nothing helpful to the Allied military deployment. Based on calculation, in the following assault to Japan, America would suffer a casualty of 1 million, and Britain for 500,000. So America did hope the Soviet could engage war on Japan after German defeat. At that time, the Soviet and Japan, they kept neutral with a non-aggression treaty. So the Soviet would not act as a passport for America or China unless benefits to itself. So the bargain needed. China's northeast area had been the target and victim of Japan and Russia. In the Russo-Japanese War in 1904, Russia was defeated and its privilege there was taken by Japan. Stalin aspired is taking back, so he insisted to rent Lushun or Port Arthur as its naval base and Dalian city as a free port, share the railway supervision in Manchuria, and resume sovereignty over the whole Sakhalin Island and Korea Islands. Most importantly, the Soviet asked the Outer Mongolia kept its status quo, that was its independence, and as a Soviet satellite state and sphere of influence. Actually, in 1924, the Outer Mongolia established the People's Republic of Mongolia as an independent country. China was entangled in domestic strifes and Japan's aggression and struggle for its own survival, yet not official recognition to Outer Mongolia's secession. About the history and the status quo of Mongolia, we will discuss in future programs. Stalin emphasized on this issue. In his mind, Outer Mongolia would be a buffer zone between the Soviet and China. He said, if another force one day or China got stronger and engage the thrust to the north from Mongolia, and it will cut off the Siberia railway or cut the Soviet into half and half, then the Soviet will be doomed. So he insisted Outer Mongolia as his buffer barrier, like the satellite states in Eastern Europe or Central Europe. And President Roosevelt agreed to what Stalin required. On August 8, 1945, 1.5 million Soviet Red Army is attacked into China's Manchuria from 3 directions. With more than 80,000 Japanese troops were destroyed and about 580,000 captured, with its own casualty of 30,000. The Chinese Communist Army moved into Manchuria from Shandong and developed very fast. A few years later, a million army fought back from there and accomplished a nationwide victory in China. At the Yalta conference, America sacrificed China's interest for Soviet military operation against Japan. The Soviet enlarged its influences at Eastern Europe, Central Europe, and Far East. Britain helped France in occupying some areas in Germany and resuming their former colonies in Asia, such as Hong Kong and Vietnam. Then, what did China get from the Yalta Conference? It was the total loss of the Outer Mongolia at the eve of the Second World War victory. China's nationalist government sent delegates to the Soviet, even including Jiang Jingguo, for negotiation. Stalin said that it is China that needs help from the Soviet rather than the Soviet needs help from China. You do not have the power. You do have to take the reality. It can be seen that the power or national power is not only the basic concept in international theory, but also the foundation for war or peace and for foreign policy making. The stronger do what they want, and the weak and take what they have, which has been the true without exception. You are weak compared to the strong, but you are strong compared to the weak. If China had been stronger enough, Japan might hesitate to invade. But if China would have waged all-out counterattack earlier, then the Soviet might give up its claim for Outer Mongolia. The same to today's Russo-Ukraine war. The key point is the real power, which will be seen in the end. The Soviet had been a typical realist, and the same to America. In 1945, Yalta Conference, America traded China interests for Soviet military assistance against Japan. But retrieving in history, and we can also see that in 1941, America reluctantly suspended oil export to Japan after China suffered invasion for years. In 1931, China's Manchuria was taken over by Japan, to which the US envoy saw no harm to America. In 1919, Paris Peace Conference, America agreed to transfer Germany's rights at the Qingdao to Japan. In 1917, Lushun Agreement, America recognized Japan's special interest in Manchuria. 1905, there's a Post-Morse Treaty. America mediated to transfer Russia's rights in Manchuria to Japan. In 1895, China was defeated by Japan, to which America believed it was fully defeated by civilization. In 1867, US Navy landed from south of Taiwan, yet withdrew when encountered fierce resistance. In 1864, US Minister to China Parker urged Washington to take Taiwan as its coal supply station. We do not deny that the kindness of America's refund of Boxer Protocol indemnity for Chinese students overseas study in America. The US government had advocated open door policy, non-recognition policy for China's sovereignty and territory integrity. Even now, Washington also acknowledges that policy of one China and Taiwan is one part of China. Yet America does not hope to see a strong and united China as its rival in Asia and in the world. Divide and rule is the policy it prefers. In international relations, there are only permanent interests, no permanent enemies or permanent friends. The Yalta Conference was important. It formed the post-war frame. Yet this conference also shamed China in loss of territory. Even if China has been regarded as one of the big powers, one lesson from it is that a nation will anyhow rely on its own power. Here comes the end of today's program, and thank you for your watching, and see you next time. Thank you, bye.